All right, let's continue with Marxism. Last time we talked about the fact that Marx felt that class contradictions will inevitably lead to class conflicts, and he considered that these socioeconomic conflicts have historically manifested themselves at distinct stages, transitional stages of development in Western Europe. In stage one, you have primitive communism, as in cooperative tribal societies, hunter-gatherers. That was a form of communism. Everyone participated. Then you have the next stage, a slave society. This is the development of tribal progression to city-state. An aristocracy is born. For example, in ancient Egypt, the vast majority of the population were slaves. In stage three, you have feudalism. The aristocrats are the ruling class, but they're merchants, and those merchants evolve into capitalists. Stage four is capitalism. The capitalists are the ruling class, and they create and employ the proletariat. Stage five, we have socialism, where workers gain class consciousness and via proletarian revolution depose the capitalist dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, replacing it in turn with a dictatorship of the proletariat, through which the socialization of the means of production can be realized, cooperative means of production, owned in common. The sixth stage that will lead to is communism, a classless, stateless society, essentially a utopian vision. This is a Marxist prediction of the future, a future that's never materialized in any Marxist socialist state. Now, according to the Marxist theoretician and revolutionary Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, quote, the principal content of Marxism was Marx's economic doctrine. Lenin is the man that transformed Marx's ideas into a true giant socialist state, the USSR. Marx believed that the capitalist bourgeois and their economists were promoting what he saw as the lie that the interests of the capitalist and those of the worker are one and the same. He's saying that's what the capitalists were saying, but that's a lie. He believed, Marx believed, that they did this by purporting the concept that the fastest possible growth of productive capital was best not only for the wealthy capitalists but also for the workers, because it provided them with employment. And it's funny to call that a lie, because those are vital tenets of American ideology today. What's good for the rich people is good for everybody, because that's the fastest way to grow everything. Now, when Marx talks about the plight of the workers, of the proletariat, he talks particularly about two main topics, two main ways they're hurt. The first is exploitation. Exploitation is a matter of surplus labor, the amount of labor one performs beyond what one receives in goods. I do all this work, but I only get back some of it. Exploitation, and that surplus labor the capitalist is taking from me in the form of profit. In capitalist mode of production, that result is more subtly, well, let me back up. Exploitation has been a socioeconomic feature of every class society, and is one of the principal features distinguishing the social classes. The power of one social class to control the means of production enables its exploitation of the other classes. In pre-capitalist economies, exploitation of the worker was achieved via physical coercion, whips and chains and physical punishment. In the capitalist mode of production, Marx says that result is more subtly achieved because the worker does not own the means of production, the factory, the capital. He or she must voluntarily enter into an exploitive work relationship with the capitalist in order to earn the necessities of life. The worker's entry into such employment is voluntary in that he or she chooses which capitalist to work for. However, the worker must work or starve. Thus, exploitation is inevitable in the voluntary, I'm making air quotes here, nature of a worker participating in a capitalist society is illusory. In America, we talk about the right to contract for work. Worker doesn't like the job, they can go somewhere else. But as we know, it's not really quite that simple. Aside from exploitation, the second great travail of the proletariat is something Marx calls alienation. Alienation denotes the estrangement of people from their humanity. which is the systematic result of capitalism. Marx is talking about that thing I've mentioned before, that dis-ease. I used to work in a craft type environment or on a farm. Now I'm a drone, I'm a piece of equipment in this massive regimented system, and it's very alienating. It's spiritually pernicious. And so under capitalism, the fruits of production belong to the employers, who expropriate the surplus created by others and so generate alienated laborers. Alienation objectively describes the worker's situation in capitalism. His or her self-awareness of this condition is not a prerequisite. You don't have to know what's wrong with you to be alienated. Now, the identity of social class derives from its relationship to the means of production. Marx describes the social classes in capitalist societies. First is the proletariat. We've already defined that. Those individuals who sell their labor power and who in the capitalist mode of production do not own the means of production, the capital, the factories, the tools. The capitalist mode of production establishes the conditions enabling the bourgeoisie to exploit the proletariat because the worker's labor generates a surplus value greater than the worker's wages. The bourgeoisie, the dominant class, those are the ones who own the means of production and buy labor power from the proletariat, thus exploiting the proletariat. They subdivide as the bourgeoisie and something I haven't mentioned before, the petite bourgeoisie, the little bourgeoisie or the petty bourgeoisie. They're the ones who employ laborers but also work, like small business owners, mom and pop shop types, peasant overlords, trade workers, etc. Marxism predicts that the continual reinvention of the means of production, advancing technology, eventually would destroy the petite bourgeoisie, degrading them from middle class to the proletariat. You could consider some of the effects of Walmart's ongoing reinvention of capitalism and perhaps see this. Now, Marxists believe that the transition from capitalism to socialism is an inevitable part of the development of human society. As Lenin said, it is evident that Marx deduces the inevitability of the transformation of capitalist society into a socialist society. And he made this happen in 1917. Marxists believe that a socialist society would be far better for the majority of the populace than its capitalist counterpart. And so, for instance, prior to the Russian Revolution of 1917, Lenin wrote that the socialization of production is bound to lead to the conversion of the means of production into the property of society. This conversion will directly result in an immense increase in the productivity of labor, a reduction of working hours, and the replacement of the remnants, the ruins of small-scale, primitive, disunited production by collective and improved labor. So, he's predicting that once we implement this socialist revolution, get rid of private property, have equality of condition for everyone, that society will become much more productive and everyone will be happier. Of course, it didn't work out that way. After a 70-year experiment, approximately 70 years, the Russians were tired. It seemed like, comparing their country to the capitalist countries, particularly their Cold War opponent, the United States, that, in fact, the market society had produced a greater quantity and quality of material life. And so communism, i.e. socialism in the strict Marxist sense, is considered by most people today a failed experiment. Now, the term socialism could be used to describe two fundamentally different ideologies, democratic socialism and Marxist-Leninist socialism. The Marxist-Leninist sought to work towards a classless, stateless, moneyless society in Marxist ideology by first creating a socialist state, which represents the proletariat, like the former USSR. On the other hand, democratic socialists attempt to work towards an ideal state by social reform and are often little different from social democrats. This is a term for European politicians, with the democratic socialists just being a little bit more leftist. We end here with our picture of Marxist-Leninist socialist, which we would call communist, Lenin and Stalin themselves in the Soviet Union, versus a democratic socialist, Francois Hollande, the new president of France, who does certainly not believe in getting rid of capitalism, but in using some social engineering to soften its harshest effects. The Marxist-Leninist form of government has been in decline since the dissolution of the Soviet Union and its satellite states. Very few countries have governments which describe themselves as socialist. As of 2011, Laos, Vietnam, Nepal, Cuba, and the People's Republic of China had governments in power which described themselves as socialist in the Marxist sense, although they're not completely. China, for example, as you know, has embraced market economics with a vengeance. On the contrary, though, electoral parties which describe themselves as socialist or democratic socialist are on the rise. They are currently dominant in the democracies of the developing world and serve as the ruling party or the main opposition party in most European democracies. Only in America is the term socialism sort of verboten. More about that next time.